I came so that they might have life and have it more abundantly. John 10:10, the last verse in our gospel today, and we celebrate Good Shepherd Sunday. We hear from the gospel of Jesus describing himself as the Good Shepherd. And today we meditate this Sunday on that image of Jesus as a Good Shepherd, that he is one who, through his sacrifice and through his laying down of his life, gives life more abundantly to us all. And this is also the World Day of Prayer for Vocations. It's a time for us to pray that the Lord may inspire more and more young people, but especially young men, to consider the priesthood and consecrated life, but especially young men and women to consider religious life as well. And this is the first year since I became the vocation director that I'm celebrating, or I'm observing, World Day of Prayer for Vocations with you. And so it's kind of good for me to just kind of talk a little bit about what a vocation director does, that I am kind of helping the bishop. He's kind of the person he's deputed to take the lead in promoting and getting that message of, no, this is a great life. Following the Lord with your whole heart and service in the church is a great life. So that's kind of my role, is to help get that message, do that promotion for our diocese. But it's not a responsibility that falls just on me or just on the bishop or just on priest. But vocation promotion is all of our responsibility. As members of the church, vocation promotion is each and every one of our responsibility. Especially in our parishes, that we should promote vocations, that we should encourage young people to consider life as a priest or a religious sister. But also not only that, but in our families too, that in our families we should start there. We should not close ourselves off to the fact that, no, we could have a vocation. One of our children could have a vocation to religious life. It's not a life of deprivation. But no, it is a life that if we kind of sacrifice, it can lead us to life more abundantly. Now I talk about that, and this week I kind of caught a story in social media about another priest in the Diocese of Jefferson, Missouri, Jefferson City, Missouri. And they kind of caught up that he wrote a letter to his parishioners because there were changes coming. He was in charge of 4 parishes, and because of circumstances in his diocese, he's in a very rural area of the Jefferson City Diocese, a priest had to leave for an extended period of time in the neighboring pastorate. And so he was asked by the bishop to take over those additional 4 parishes. So starting this Sunday, he's taking over 8 parishes. He's in charge of 8 parishes. Incredible, right? Has to drive 200 miles on the weekend. Crazy. I'm glad you think it's crazy, because I don't want to have to drive that much more. I'll tell you that. But he wrote to his parishioners. He said, this is what's happening. This is what's happening and taking place. That I have to take over these 4 parishes because for this time, because there's no other option. There's no other priest that can serve this area. But he also said that this was coming. He was a priest for 30 years, and he said, this is something that I've been talking about for a long time. We're going to get to this day, and it's finally here. And he said, I've tried to promote vocations. I've tried to encourage it. And sometimes I get met with some excuses, he said. He says, I talk to young men, and they say, no, not me, not me. He talks to families, and they say, no, not my son. And he says that we have to adopt a spirit of generosity, that is what will help us, is what may help us to accept God's will, but also to flourish as a church. If we accept a spirit of generosity, we may find that, vocations will flow out and our church will become so much more vibrant. Openness to God's will. And openness to God's will lead us to life abundantly. If we ask the Lord, if we petition Him and say, Lord, where do you want me to go? We may be surprised at what He's able to do and what we're able to do, the adventure He could lead us on. Because it's a very joyful life. It's a very joyful life, the life of a priest. There's actually a book with that same title called Joy of the Priesthood, and it's written by a priest of this diocese, Msgr Stephen Rosetti. Now, you may find that name familiar because he no longer lives in the Syracuse Diocese, but he's actually the head exorcist for the Archdiocese of Washington, D.C. I think he has a podcast, too. I haven't seen it, but I've seen a lot of his other stuff. But I actually had dinner with him one time. There's no anecdote. I just had dinner with him one time. But he's a clinical psychologist, and he wrote a book called Joy of the Priesthood about maybe 20 years ago, and he talked about that phenomenon. Even though we kind of assume that priests have a tough life, we kind of see them as having a life of deprivation, that priests are overwhelmingly happy. In fact, they have the highest job satisfaction of almost any job that we've recorded in this country. He looked at some data from about 20 years ago, and they looked at one specific question that asked priests, how satisfied are you with your line of work? 96% responded either I'm pretty satisfied or very satisfied. 24 out of 25 priests responded that, yeah, no, I'm pretty satisfied at the very least. Another question that was asked of them is, would you choose this line of work again, so to speak? 88% responded yes. That kind of tells you something, that priests are overwhelmingly happy. But as I say that, you may say, like, well, Father, if priests are overwhelmingly happy and that's kind of out there, why do we have a vocation crisis? Why are we struggling to fill churches with pastors? I'm thinking probably the answer to that is that maybe it's just the way we view happiness as a society, what we think will make us happy. I'll go to another document, this time a papal document. Pope John Paul II in 1992 wrote a document on the formation of priests called Pastores Dabo Vobis. In English, that means, I will give you shepherds. It's taken from a line in the book of Jeremiah. And in it, he talked about the formation of priests, the kind of where we've been, where he sees us going. And he said that looking at the landscape, that yeah, there is a difficulty. The culture kind of presents a difficulty because it's not easy. It's not the first thing that comes to mind for young men to become a priest. But he started off by saying this, is that across the board, there's the people, each and every person has a strange hunger and thirst for God. He said that plainly, that each and every person has a hunger and thirst for God. That goes for atheists and agnostics too, or so-proclaimed atheists and agnostics. They think because maybe we could call it, they have a inclination for the divine. That's the same thing as a hunger and thirst for God. But he also acknowledges that from time to time, each and every person is prone to loneliness. We all are, even if we're surrounded by people all day, even if we have a huge family, there are times when we can be very lonely. And he says that one of the things we do to kind of cure that loneliness is to consume. That we think that by seeking and consuming things, that'll fill our loneliness, that'll cure our loneliness, or fill that hunger in our heart. And the truth is, it's not going to satisfy us fully. We may comfort eat. Sometimes people comfort eat because they're just going through a difficult time. Maybe even on a higher level, we may seek out to buy new things. Maybe buy a new toy, new car, new gadget. We may seek to achieve. Maybe we think our achievements will help us cure that loneliness. Yeah, if I make myself feel better just about what I'm able to do, that'll cure that loneliness. But I think they only fill us halfway. They're never going to fill us the full way. And it's only God that can do it. But really, maybe that's the other side of the coin. That consuming isn't going to lead us to happiness. But giving away will. Not consuming, but giving away. Sacrifice is something that inexplicably leads us to happiness. Giving ourselves away, giving our lives away can lead us to an incredible satisfaction. Much like the Good Shepherd today. Jesus shows us the way. We hear that Jesus say, I am the Good Shepherd. I laid down my life for my sheep. I laid down my life for my sheep so that they might have life and have it more abundantly. That's the Paschal mystery, as we say. That is the story of the cross, that by sacrificing his life, he gave life to the world. That's the same deal with the priest, is that by sacrificing in a way, they're able to give life to their flock. And even to themselves. They can, even by sacrificing maybe some things and choosing priesthood, they can have a life that they never thought they'd imagine. They could have a happier life than they ever thought they could. Let's just look at one example, Pope Leo. I'm incredibly fascinated by his story because he started off as just a normal kid from the south side of Chicago and went to Villanova and discerned a vocation, and that led him all over the world. From the Villanova and the Augustinian order, then he went down to Peru, and at one point he was the provincial of that order, so he was traveling all over the world. He was going to Africa, to Asia, to visit other people in his order, and eventually it led him to Italy. And I kind of think, what an incredible life. And it was just because he said yes to God and let God lead. That's what's open to us in a vocation, in a life of vocation, that sacrifice can lead us to life, and to life more abundantly. And that's the good news, is that it does. Now, people will come up to me and say from time to time, like, well, Father, you seem like you enjoy your life, but you don't have a family. You gave up a family. I said, I didn't give up a family. I got my mom, I got my dad, I got my sister, and the parish is my family. They call me Father, right? So it's in a different way. I sacrifice maybe a biological family and descendants for something else. and something that God wanted, I assume that that's what God wanted me to do. And so we're grateful for that. We're just grateful that God gives us that opportunity to maybe sacrifice one way and go away from one good to choose another good. I'll leave you with this thing that a priest told me right before I entered seminary. Because a lot of guys that go into seminary, they're on the fence up until the time they step foot in the seminary. They're like, I don't know if I want to do this. I don't know if I want to do that. I want a family. So they go back and forth, and I wasn't any different. So I've talked to one priest and kind of talked about it with him, and he said, what you have here is you're choosing between two goods, married life or priesthood. The good thing is that you can't really go wrong, no matter what you feel God is calling you to. But just remember this. No matter what you choose, whether it's to get married, whether it's to become a priest, they're each just another way to love.